Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. On this podcast, we are usually watching something week to week, introducing all of you to something new to watch. And in today's episode, I am joined once again by Sona.
Hi.
I'm your host, Victor, since I always forget to introduce myself. And we are here to discuss the season finale, episode 9 of Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV Plus, an episode called, do you remember, Sona?
I don't remember.
I'm looking at it myself. Everything becomes symbol and irony. Sona, did this show become all symbol and irony by the end?
I mean, definitely ironic at the end, I would say.
Somewhat. Before we get into all of that, I had a couple of things to touch on. One is the Knicks game last night. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was actually out to dinner at a place that was not showing the Knicks game. It was a speakeasy type place. So I was monitoring the score on my phone, and then I got home in time for the final 4 minutes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I got so because of the game one in the series, which I rewatched the fourth quarter yesterday, by the way, just because it was so insane when you think about all the things that had to fall into place for them, the Knicks to blow that lead. Because they weren't like, I mean, and when I say they blew the lead, it's not even like they played badly. It's like literally like miracle shots and things like that final 2-pointer at the regular time. Just the fact that that ball went in at all is absolutely insane. The way it like bounced off the rim and was straight up and then fell right back in again. It was like something out of like, you see on those high school games or something, but that's how it went. And unfortunately, that one hoop, and I mean, and there's other things that led up to it, is like a differentiator here, whether they win or lose this series, which is pretty crazy.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah, exactly. But I was once again, even watching yesterday when they were up by 15 or something with like 3 minutes to go. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, seriously, we've been burned now.
Exactly. That was like ultra paranoid because, yeah, I mean, I basically was ready to turn off the game back in that first game in the series. And and boy,
Well, and to be fair, the Knicks have had some great comebacks in just the matter of just a few minutes as well. So I guess it's a two-way street.
But now they've improved their odds from about a 4% chance of winning the series to a 16% chance of winning the series. But hey, it does happen. We will have to wait and see how those next games go. I mean, if they win the next one, it becomes a 50-50 chance, right? So there you go.
There you go.
Fingers crossed. But they are on the road. But then they've played better on the road, so who knows? And the Pacers specifically have not played that well at home. So,
although I heard this morning they've not lost 2 games in a row this season.
It's all you know what? There's so many statistics where they're like they have a losing record at home, but not 2 games in a row, and so
right.
It's all just hey,
it's a wash.
Whoever wants to play hardest next game is going to win. That's how it works. A little bit of news about this show, which is currently in its second season, in production on its second season. So Apple was right to be excited about this, and the creator of the show, Jonathan Tropper, actually has another series in between coming out later this year or the beginning of next year, a Las Vegas set thriller starring Anya Taylor-Joy based on a best-selling novel. And they've just announced yesterday, I guess, in anticipation of the finale last night, that they had extended their first look deal with him. So he'll be doing a lot more stuff with him. I think he has 2 movies that are coming out on Apple TV. So anyway, they are pretty high on this guy. And at the same time announced the fact that this had been the biggest first season for any Apple TV series. I'm not sure that means that much, given, that they don't have any kind of mega blockbusters. But given the fact that, I mean, Ted Lasso season 1 was pretty huge. So this is a pretty good indication that this show has done pretty well. And of course, we're getting another season, whether we like it or not, Sona, whether we like it or not. All right, before we get into the breakdown, I have a lot of mixed opinions, literally from scene to scene on this particular episode. And I watched it with my wife, and we were on the same page with a lot of the stuff that unravels here over the course of this episode. But before we break it down and kind of talk about the positives and negatives of this episode, what are your general thoughts on it?
Well, I like that we got answers to certain things. However, I did not find the answers satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
That's my bottom line here.
Yeah, I think it was 2 episodes ago, maybe last episode, where I was saying that I like things that happen in the show, but that was the worst episode of the season. This is the worst episode of the season. This one wins, hands down. Yeah, I just thought that it was, and maybe you have similar opinions. I did like some of the interpersonal scenes. I thought some of the stuff that has the least to do with the plot worked pretty well.
I
And
agree.
then the plot, about maybe halfway through the episode, it just becomes just a bunch of check boxes being checked off. It was really like, wow, what is happening here? And really, it's like, and it's almost like they got themselves into this situation because of trying to frame things with the death of Paul early on. It almost feels like they needed to get themselves out of that situation over the course of the season. And as the show developed, I assume they probably wrote the pilot and had the framing device set up before they actually started breaking the story down, that it really felt like they had trapped themselves in trying to resolve that, because it really became the least interesting part of the show. And it seems like the show itself didn't know how to address that, where even as we were watching it, it seemed like that was such an insignificant part of things until the very, very end. And then the more that became the center of the story, the less interested I became in that particular mystery.
Well, I also felt that parts of this episode were strangely slow
Yes.
for
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for a finale with a penultimate episode that we also felt was kind of strangely slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't think it's unusual for a finale to not be at a breakneck pace. But given what happened or didn't happen last week, I expected this to move along more quickly than it did.
Yeah, there was no ticking clock here, which was very strange. They could have easily had him have to do his own investigation into the crime, and it could have been more frenetic, where he's trying to, maybe pull off another heist that he is getting blackmailed into performing while he's then doing this investigation. And then he cracks the crime, and then he confronts Sam. And you could imagine that happening on a clock, like you create an artificial clock to create some suspense. And you're absolutely right. Like the last episode, they're hanging out in the city for one last time. He seems, and maybe it's intentional, because Mel like criticizes him for not fighting hard enough. But he is just so like kind of like shrugs his shoulders, like, I guess I'm going to jail. Which is not really a good way to build suspense in the show. So I guess that's not the intention, but still, I just didn't think it was a very well, really not well paced at all. I totally agree. And like I said, I think that the show, in a lot of ways, is more interested, and I am too, in that more relaxed, questioning version of the show that it is. But then they keep getting dragged back into this supposed potential murder that they've introduced. And I feel like they were kind of trapped by having that as a framing device. And maybe that was a mistake. Like oftentimes you have to have that hook in the pilot episode to keep people engaged. And I feel like that kind of became a trap for the way they structured the story. All right. So let's get into the breakdown a little bit. So we open the episode, and he has two different dreams that conflate here. One is him diving into the pool, reunited with his family. The other one is him emerging from the pool, being arrested for Paul's murder the night of. And he even mentions in the narration, there's so much narration in this episode. We got to talk about that too, because some people are better at narration than others, let's say. And not necessarily the performer's problem either. It's the narration itself and the over reliance on it, I think.
I did have a minor problem with one performance this episode, but
Okay. Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
yeah.
But then him emerging from the water and almost relieved at the fantasy of having been arrested and maybe being off the hook. And I think that is, once again, I think there is something intentional here, even as it maybe isn't the most pleasurable viewing experience, of him being very passive in this particular situation, because we see it here too, right? That he kind of is hoping that he gets arrested, even in his dream reality, right?
Hmm.
What did you think about this as like kind of an opening segment of the show?
I think it was well done. I just personally don't care for that kind of dream sequence
Same.
and dream upon a dream. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I just don't love it, and they've done it before, so I didn't love seeing it back again. But I feel like that is my personal opinion. I think it worked fine.
Yeah, I mean, it did work fine, I guess, like visually, just that opening sequence, but I didn't like what it kind of springboards into, which is him having this like, when you're about to go to jail, you really start to appreciate all the details of everything you're going to miss on the outside world. And that all culminates with him going for, to the golf range and having this
Mhm.
kind of indignant response to that. But although I did like that conversation, just the fact that he keeps calling the guy buddy. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah.
It's like very threatening, buddy. And he's like, hey, if you really did think I was some crazy killer, maybe not the best idea to come out here and kick me off your golf course.
Yeah, he really embraced that idea that he could be a murderer.
As far as threatening is, anyway. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the first time that he's played with this potential threatening persona, and maybe that's something that leans into more in season two. We can actually speculate on what we want to see in season two when we get to the end of the episode.
Yeah, that poor candy shop guy as well, right? In Princeton.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, that direct, kind of correlation to that darker aspect of himself. So then Coop is, like you mentioned, that it's in the tone of the episode, but definitely in the character as well. This kind of very lackadaisical response to potentially losing his freedom, and he has this, going from person to person, preparing himself for the inevitable. It seems like in his mind, inevitable arrest for this murder, even though he's sometimes indignant about it, but he seems to be he's accepted this to some extent that it's going to happen. He talks to Kat, his lawyer. She tells him things don't look great. There's not, this potential plea bargain isn't the worst possible outcome. And then it's like he has this final supper with his family. First of all, he talks to Mel, aside from having the family over. And or I should say, Mel actually talks to Bernie, right, and discovers that he has transferred all of his assets over to her. Is that how that works? By the way, is that if you're, I mean, I know this is not your direct purview, but do you have any knowledge of that? Like, is it if you are potentially if you're trying to protect your assets specifically because you're accused of a crime, can you just transfer them to your spouse? And especially if she's your ex, how does that work? Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I don't directly know the answer to that, but the way the conversation happened, it seemed like the only thing he had recently done was transfer the deed over to her, which, is just a real estate transaction. I think that's fine if both their names were on it. I assume both their names were on it, and then he just puts it in her, removes himself, puts it in her name alone. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It seemed like the other things that were established about the trusts and whatever, that seemed stuff to me that had already been done for planning purposes anyway.
Right, right. And then he
And I
has,
did think in
yeah,
this scene, Barney's a very good friend to him because we know Barney has his own concerns about what's going on, but he doesn't take the bait with Mel
right.
to go any further. And he says, even if I did know, I probably wouldn't tell you. So I think
Yeah,
that's a really nice
exactly.
friendship they have.
Right. There's also, I mean, there's the plausible deniability aspect of it because at some point, it probably is better that Mel know some of this stuff. But I agree at this moment that it's kind of he's doing the right thing for both of them. One is keeping the confidence, but the other one is, if he doesn't want to tangle up Mel in any additional concerns or any additional information he might have about it, and he doesn't know the full picture, obviously, of what's going on, unless he heard things while he's passed out in the previous episode.
Hmm.
But maybe he's just pretending to fall asleep. But other than that, he probably is protecting everybody in that regard, including himself. Then we have the dinner with Allie, and the family comes over. Allie's off her meds. You have
Yeah,
complained
and
about the fact that she seems to be a very mentally healthy, mentally unhealthy person.
yes.
What did you think about this kind of the cracks starting to show?
Well, okay, first of all, not related to your question,
Yeah.
but they're doing this TV thing that happens often where everybody's sitting in the dark except for a solitary light. And that
Yes.
really bothers me. Why would anybody eat like that? It doesn't make any sense. And I noticed in Coop's
I
house
know you like
generally,
Ozark, by the way, and I think all of Ozark is shot that way. Just so you
yeah,
know.
and at least in this episode, possibly in prior episodes, Coop's house is always very dark. Is he trying to keep the electric bill down? What's going on? Like,
Maybe, maybe.
why? So, but anyway, I did love Allie's deadpan. Like, Yeah, sure. I went off my meds to have sex. And then, no, seriously, I did go off my meds to have sex. I thought was funny the way she presented it. And I like that it was at least addressed that this is happening and there are issues. There are, a couple of references in this episode, right? Like later when the house is a mess. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe he's just blaming Allie, but he says it's partly because of Allie that the house is a mess. So I like that we're addressing the consequences, but I don't know how realistic a portrayal this is of somebody struggling with bipolar disorder and
Right.
being off their meds. It feels to me, and candidly, I've not had this personal experience. I mean, somewhat, but a few degrees removed from being like in my house. It doesn't feel accurate to me, but
Mhm.
what do I know?
Yeah, I also don't have experience with it that either. Although she did seem to have, some aspects of this even earlier when she was medicated, when she went out and like bought all the cereal, and
Cereal,
she
yeah.
seems to. And I do like I really like this performance, by the way, of all the maybe my favorite performance of all these people on the show. I don't know how realistic it is, but I do like when you see her trying to be the caregiver, and on one aspect you know that it is maybe in her nature, but in another aspect it's like it's her own knowing that she can go so wrong. It's like she desperately, you see the desperation in her, of her wanting to be okay when she's okay. And there's a real, even when she goes and rescues Hunter, there's something a little off. There's something overly performative about her being the good parent in a way, because maybe she knows that it's tenuous what is to come. So anyway, I really did like this, and I do like seeing her in this episode in general, just losing it. And once again, I don't know if this is realistic or not, but I like pretty much everything she did. I mean, the actress herself, Lena Hall, who I haven't seen in anything else, I think is fantastic here, and can also sing. I mean, she does a great job of selling doll
Mhm.
parts when she performs, which is a song that really rips out your heart. I like how she reacts to it. She's like in the middle of it, and she's like, "Wow, this song!" It's like, you know what? Maybe not the song to be singing when you're having a mental emotional breakdown. Considering it's basically what the song is about in and of itself. Maybe it's a little too on the nose. And this sequence in the bar is really funny. And it really feels like this show in general, by the way. I don't know how Jonathan, I don't think Jonathan Tropper is that old. I think he's like in his 40s. But it really feels like a show that's been written by someone who's maybe older, because
Mhm.
I feel like there's certain things that are being forgotten. Like, not only like we talked about, like everyone has Ring cameras. Everybody would be like saying, "Hey, I saw somebody else today. I'm jogging in my neighborhood. Check this out." So I can only imagine that aspect of it. But like this particular thing, and maybe they will, maybe she'll be famous in the next season of the show, because this video will be going viral. Bruce's
Yes.
Bruce's wife did not have to wait for the graffiti. Bruce's wife would have seen this in her social media feeds the very next day.
Yeah. Such
I
a
think
good
they've,
point.
especially when you look at the crowd, and it's not like a bunch of 60-year-olds, like
Right.
her friends that are
Right.
visiting her. The crowd seems to be all like 21-year-olds.
Right.
So yeah, what did you think about this in general, regardless of that critique?
I think you're making a good point from a practicality standpoint, but definitely, I think the whole scene starting in the kitchen
Yes.
was fun to watch. The interactions between the four of them. I
Yep.
think they've established a really nice brother-sister relationship between Coop and his sister. I liked, Coop's kind of grimaces about the sex talk and ending
Yes.
with like, sure, let's take the kids to the bar. And then the
And
next
by the
scene
way,
is,
do you think they were really just going to leave him at home, or did they just figure that they all left he would? Because that's pretty messed up. He's like basically having his final meal with them, and they're like, "Okay, see you later, Dad."
I kind of feel like they could have. It could have gone in that direction. I wouldn't have been surprised. So, yeah, but I like the cut to the three of them at the bar then. And yeah, I think all of it was fun to watch.
I like
Strange
what.
to me for a finale, but fun to
Yes,
watch.
yes, yes. I agree. I agree. Not really what you expect to see in the finale for sure.
Yeah, a
But
weird place to spend time in the finale, but it was entertaining.
But honestly, I'm going to spend more time on this first half of the episode rather than the kind of the plot
Mhm.
part, the
Mhm.
back half, because this was the part that I enjoyed more. The I like the revelation during this whole thing in the bar where she mentions that he had sex with me in my nephew's bed,
Yes.
and Hunter's like, "What?" And Coop's like, "Oh no."
I know Coop was kind of like there was like a little like, sorry, buddy. Like, now we all have to know this.
This is hilarious. By the way, but like I said, I do hope that they actually embrace this, and she is like internet famous after this. Do you? And that's the other thing I was going to ask you is, do you think that she having this meltdown on stage is going to get her fired from this job she has because it's like a steady gig for her? And I'm like,
Yeah, I wondered about that.
and once again, by the way, I feel like maybe someone who's watching this and has that, oh wow, she embarrassed herself on stage. Uh, she's going to lose her job as one reading of this. But I think there's a different version of this where it's like, oh, they're definitely asking her to come back. Do you know how many people are going to show up next week?
I mean, I think my bigger concern was not with the whole actual thing that happened, but the disclosure of the mental health issues,
Yes.
I think could flag for an employer, which there are other repercussions. I don't think you can fire someone for having a mental, it gets complicated.
Right.
But anyway, I was more concerned that she was so candid about her mental health issues.
Well, I mean, I don't think she would lose her job for that. I mean, if everybody who had mental health problems couldn't play music, we wouldn't have any musicians. But it's like I think that it's more of the. I mean, I can imagine if she went and you know got belligerent, hurt somebody in the audience, then of course you would want her off the stage. But I think until she crosses a line in public, anyway, I think they probably would keep her around. Like, but I guess it remains to be seen. Or if they might just drop this whole storyline next season, but
I
hopefully
would
not.
have liked to have seen her go back to playing music at the end of the scene. It would have made me feel a little bit better about
Yeah,
her employment security.
yeah, yeah. I actually do like if I could suggest that I would actually like to see her actually springboard from this into some minor celebrity, and she's doing great next season. As far as this goes, I mean, as far as her mental health and whether she stays on her meds, I don't know about all that, but I would like to see it not be a ding against her this particular moment. And I hope she doesn't go back to Bruce. Hopefully not.
Oh gosh, I hope not.
When they get back home that night, Coop continues this process he's going through of getting rid of his things. He gives this watch to Hunter. What do you think about this story? He tells Hunter about where he bought and what it says about him as his character, actually, that he bought this watch in the moment. Excuse me, in the moment of his life where he actually worried the most that he couldn't afford his lifestyle. He was, over his head at work, and now he had a second baby. And at his most stressed out, he actually goes and, in a way, takes the risk of buying this incredibly expensive watch as a way to what? To motivate him, or to convince himself that he can do this. What did you think? It's A, what it symbolically represents, but B, what does it say about his character that maybe when he's cornered, he actually doubles down on potentially a risk?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the final message was fake it till you make it, and we're
Right.
all faking it till we make it,
Which
right?
is true. Yes.
So I think it's showing his willingness to participate in that with the faith that it's all going to work out in the end, and his belief, which could very well be accurate. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought that everybody's doing that around him. So, he's just keeping up with the Joneses, as the theme song would say.
Okay, that terrible theme song.
I've been skipping it, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I know everybody I know who watches the show skips it, but and I do like that performer, by the way, but boof, not that song.
And I think maybe, a good message for his son, who we've seen has his own issues that he struggles with, right?
Right.
About overthinking things, that, maybe just lighten up on yourself and realize everybody is having those same feelings that you're having, and the other people are just faking it. So you fake it too. You're going to be fine.
I buy that part of it, but think about the reality. Imagine him as a young father living in probably a modest home at that point and just starting to get his footing underneath him and feeling that suddenly that he's overextended himself and that, if he loses this job, he can't afford what he already has and aspiring for more. And at that moment, seeing this watch and being like, I'm going to buy this watch that I can't afford on top of the, uh, what do you call that reaction where you are worried about your financial situation? So you put yourself into a deeper financial hole, which I think is interesting because that is a behavior that people do, actually.
It's a behavior that he's doing this whole season.
Right. And I mean, he's doing it now. That's what I thought was kind of interesting, that it's a
Yeah.
kind of it's showing, or he's explaining that symbolically this watch represents something that he has been doing this whole entire time. And I guess it has been
And it,
paying
it
off
was
with
working for him, right? So,
exactly. It's been paying off this whole time. So that's probably explains why he keeps having this maybe overinflated belief that nothing's going to go wrong, until of course he has that conversation later with Mel saying that, yeah, and then he took his eye off the ball for a second and everything started falling apart.
right. Well, I think to be totally accurate, his eye was on a different ball, but yeah.
Right. I also did like this scene. He after seeing Hunter, he tries to do a similar thing with his daughter. She just gives him the cold shoulder and says that, we don't need to have this conversation. But then I actually thought it was very touching to have her just go and cuddle up with him on the
I thought
sofa.
her acting was great in
Yeah,
that scene. You
yeah.
could really read that, she had been holding it back and was slowly letting herself feel all the emotions that have been building up. I thought she did a terrific job there.
Yeah, I thought she was terrific, and I thought they also did a really good job in the way they shot this to make her. She obviously is. I think she's even older than she's playing here, so she's probably like in her early 20s, playing someone who's like 17. But they do a really good job of just the way she's dressed in her pajamas and curling up with her dad, and John Hamm's giant hand on her shoulder,
Hmm.
that making her like a little girl again, right? If in that
Hmm.
moment, and of course, that is like what she's reverting to, and remembering those times that she curled up on her dad's chest, for comfort. And then, of course, knowing that is potentially something she's going to lose. I thought Ham's performance here is weird, though. His the way he's just kind of patting her on the head while he's like, it's as if he's
I
distracted from
know.
watching the movie. I thought they made a bad choice. Like, she's really giving it her all. He really is not.
I know. I kind of expected him to kind of like wrap her up a little bit more and say something, even just like, I know. Well, something comforting.
Or to pretend to watch the movie and maybe, be crying or something to himself. But he's just
Hmm.
kind of like just watching the movie and kind of patting her on the head. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure why they choose that particular performance. Like it really does it over and over again on this show. I know you've been more complimentary to the character itself. I think they present him as like a very cold character, in my opinion, most of the time.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I do agree with your comment about this specific scene.
And they're watching this thing. I don't know how I'd have to think about whether the plot of this thing somehow it plays off in this movie. I would love to see like a giant sting type, where you think he's selling the art, the famous painting, but he's double crossed the art dealer or something. I would actually love to see that. I love those type of heists and double cross type fun thrillers.
Well,
So
I mean,
maybe.
it is about a scam artist, right? I haven't seen The Sting, but
Oh, you've never seen it? Oh,
no,
okay.
I haven't.
This thing is basically, yeah, it's about these con men. And, I'm not going to spoil this thing, but it's one of the most, by the way, if anyone hasn't ever seen it, at the time, it was like almost as big as Star Wars. It's like a massive, massive worldwide blockbuster, one of the most popular films of all times based on ticket sales. And, but it's very entertaining. Even now, it still holds up. And yeah, it's about these two con men. And basically, they rip off the mob, and then they have to pull off one more heist for the mob, basically.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, of course, when you get to the end of the movie, it turns out like, oh, who was conning who? There was like a con within a con within a con. And like the whole
Right.
sting at the end is all like this unraveling. And we don't have that here, but maybe we get that in season 2. Maybe this thing will be a template for, maybe they're seeding it here that there'll be some kind of giant con. I love those type of movies. So I would love to see it. It's kind of like Ocean's 11, just to use that, another film I really love. But the whole idea that you think you're seeing one thing, but it's
Right.
actually something else, that type of
Right.
thing. Anyway, good template for this type of show going forward if they want to have a fun heist in season 2. This show does need more fun, I would say, by the way.
Yeah, there are definitely parts of it that are fun, but
Sure.
I think it's still figuring out what it is, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. One whole season in. And I do agree that it's still not sure what it wants to be when it grows up. So he meets with Kat one more time, and now he rejects the plea deal. Once again, I know this isn't your purview, but just general opinion. Do you think this was a good deal that she was offering him? I mean, given the lay of the land,
Well,
given the
it's a
evidence.
great deal if you're actually a murderer. But,
Yes, absolutely, yes.
you know, to come back to okay, first of all, 6 years is a long time, I think, when you have kids that age. 6 years might not seem that long if you're in a different stage of life.
Sure.
But also, to go back to something we talked about before, still, even in the nitty gritty of talking about this plea deal, he refuses to share anything that could be
Yes.
helping his case,
Yes, I know.
which is becoming like a little bit cutting off your nose to spite your face
Right.
situation, right? Because if you're at that point of seriously considering the plea deal, don't you have to ask, well, what if I told you these things?
Right.
Would it change the calculus at all? Right. So I kind of didn't like that. And then also, this is not an original thought from me. This is actually something I saw online. I'm not sure it was explained how they know this is a DNA match to Coop, because
Yeah.
generally your DNA is only in the system if you've previously committed some sort of crime or if you have volunteered to give your DNA. And we didn't see any of those things happening. So I'm kind of confused about the DNA match situation, unless it was explained and I missed it.
And this is maybe just from TV, watching too many TV shows, but there's always like you drank a soda bottle and you throw it into the trash, and then they followed you and they pull the Coke
Yeah,
bottle out of
you
the
could do
trash.
that. Yeah.
You can, if it's like left. So, and this is, I think this is where it came from. Didn't they get his DNA from his trash from the Princeton
Ah, I forgot
flyer?
about the blood. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. Okay, so it
Yeah.
was explained. I feel
Yeah, I
better.
think it came from that, and like they were
Yes.
looking in the trash because I assume that they probably just got when he was attacked, he got blood splatter on something, and then the family just cleaning up. Like
Yeah,
Mel
yeah.
probably was just like, "Ew, I don't want to look at
No,
this," and
I
just
had
threw it all in the
totally
trash.
forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding me.
So I think that's where it came from. Yeah. But I don't even know. Like, I'm glad that you clarified that, because I didn't even know if legally you could just like take public. If I drink from a, I mean, we're watching Mobland
It's
right now, and on Mobland, they are planting DNA that they got from like a glass someone drank out of. So it's,
Yeah, this is a little tricky for me not being in this practice area because it is on his private property.
right,
It's not at McDonald's or whatever,
right,
right?
right.
So I'm not sure for that reason.
Or the police station. There's always that in the police station, right? Where they
Yes.
drink the cup of coffee and then
Yeah.
you see them come in with the gloved
Yeah.
hand to pick it up afterwards. So yeah, I don't know that it seems to make sense from TV watching
Mhm.
because it happens in every TV show, but not sure if it holds up in court. And then we have a good scene, actually. I think a good scene where Mel and Coop finally have it out, and she's like, "Why are you giving all your stuff away?"
Yeah, this was good.
And he makes all these excuses, going like, "It's just an old watch. Come on." And she's like, "Will you stop?" Because even I think even as a viewer, you get annoyed with his internal monologue and how he constantly like says the exact opposite thing out loud for some reason. And she's like, "Will you stop just lying to me about all this stuff?" But to your point, he never. Yeah, I mean the whole thing with Kat and the investigation and the whole idea that he wouldn't say like, "I was in New York City and whatever, I have a credit card transaction, ping my phone, even if he has a burner phone, here's the burner phone, here's where I was," right? Like there's so many things could be like, there's no way I could have killed him. Look at his time of death and look at where I was physically when he was shot, right?
Yeah, it
Like
just
Yeah,
it
he could
doesn't
have gotten
make any
himself out of
sense.
this situation, right? Because he doesn't want to admit to his family. Like, I mean, they needed to at least bring that up in the show of being like, I know I can exonerate myself, but I refuse to let them know that I've been robbing people, and that's how I've been covering my own ass. And I can imagine being like, I'm so ashamed of them knowing this that I won't let them know it. But we need to know that about him. He seems to be like really angry that Kat can't help him out. And it's just like, what are you talking about, man? You have proof you weren't there. What are you talking about?
Hmm.
You
And
just,
she has that sense that he's holding something
yes.
back. And
Yeah.
even with her prompting him, he's still just like,
Yeah. She's like, you have something. She literally is like looking him in the face,
yeah,
going like, you have something that will exonerate yourself, but you got to tell me now. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, I didn't do it. What more do you need? I didn't do it.
Yeah. Just prove me. Just prove it's,
Yeah.
And then, which by the way, is irritating to me because it contradicts what he's saying here. When he breaks, when he yells at Mel and says, look, like, my life is falling apart. That's not how it works. I can't just, you don't want me to take this plea deal, but that's not how this works. This is the real world, right? And that none of this makes sense because, like he is literally in a situation where he's making it sound like this is just how it is. This is what happens to people, that his entitlement isn't getting him off the hook, but he's acting that way, but that's total baloney. It's like, he could literally be off the hook if he admits to a much smaller crime, right? So he doesn't have to talk about stealing the painting. He could make it sound like it's something completely else. And it could open a whole other can of worms, but he doesn't. It's like they have to prove a whole other case, and they're not going to investigate him for that. They just want to, if he can
Yeah.
exonerate himself, saying that this is where I was, I have eyewitnesses, and it's just so crazy. Even the fact that he like denies that he's been in a fight, when that fight occurred in the city, it's all just crazy.
Totally agree.
But it does lead to this good scene between him and Mel being like, look, you never fight. You always just kind of sit back and expect things to go your way. And when they don't, you just give up. And, and she's right, which of course motivates him to change his tune. But this
And
was
that's been a theme throughout the show, right? Like
absolutely,
at her
absolutely.
birthday party, when the daughter says, "Why didn't you fight for
Right.
us?"
Right.
At Mel's birthday party, when the daughter says, "Why
Right.
didn't you fight for us?"
Yeah, and then even when he speaks to Mel earlier
Hmm.
and says like, you betrayed me, and she's just like, you weren't in this marriage way before I started
Hmm.
sleeping with Nick, right? So yeah, this is a theme that comes over and over again from everybody, all the family members. Oh, and even Hunter too, right? When Hunter's like, he's like, oh, you can stay in Hunter's room or whatever, and he's like, oh, it's that no big difference. Like it's I barely see you anyway, right? So it's like this
Right.
idea that
Hmm.
he's always kind of absentee. And maybe like the whole revelation here is that he learns to, I think we're supposed to read it that way, that he's learned to appreciate this family more. Of
Oh,
course,
for sure.
this episode culminates, nearly culminates. There's like one culmination point, and then there's yet another. But the first one, when we have that whole family reunion shot, that kind of idealized view, which is what he's been trying to come back to, or he tells himself that's what he's trying to come back to over and over again. Although he really hasn't fought for that until maybe right now. And then he goes back to Kat and tells him, I will not take this deal. She's like, oh my God, we just talked about this. Why do you change your mind
I mean, she
one
took
day
it
later?
really well, honestly.
She did. She was like, okay. But this is when things start to unravel. She looks at her phone numbers and is like, why are there no text messages, any communication between Sam and me? There must be a second phone. And then he recruits Elena, who's forgiven her. He's forgiven her for stealing his money. And he did figure it out eventually, even though he didn't get it right last time. And this is when we have him break into Sam's. Oh, I guess he didn't break. He breaks in, I guess, because Elena is not. She's in there working, but he is piggybacking on top of that. Good thing he knows her, right? There's another reason they introduced her into the plot, I guess. And they ransack the house. They can't find the second burner phone, which maybe she's disposed of. However, they find, very importantly, this suicide note. And then we get a long, long monologue and long flashback to like Olivia Munn's character, Sam, her life up until this point.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Olivia Munn shouldn't do narration.
This was the problem with acting that I had in this episode. And I actually, first of all, I don't think I'm very critical of people's acting. I think I only notice when something is really not working.
Mhm.
So for me to notice, I think it must be pretty bad. But also, I kind of like the way this started. I liked the idea that they were kind of giving her a parallel of Coop's narration, and we could
Right. This is
see
how it happened. Yeah.
how it developed and all of that. I enjoyed all of that. But then at some point towards the end of that narration and the talking directly to Coop, it took a left turn that I didn't. It started feeling very stilted and insincere.
I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of this is on the performer. I mean, I don't think she's good at this particular thing. I've liked her performance overall in the show, by the way, but I didn't think she was great in this episode, even in trying to sell some of the most, her becoming the femme fatale. Even that didn't really work for me, but the narration definitely didn't work for me. But I got to say, it's also the writing on the show because immediately after this monologue, we have a long John Hamm monologue, and he has been done a great job of doing that. And then the whole thing at the end where he's talking about like all of life has become smoke and mirrors and images and symbolism, and what I was just like, what is going on here? Like, holy cow. Like, you can't
Fair,
you can't lean
fair.
into the monologuing this much. This is like really getting excruciating. But yeah, like this is the weakest part of the episode. These back to back monologues, and especially hers, is really really rough.
Really rough. I mean, and I said that unlike you, the narration worked for me for the first half, but then it just didn't. And the scene where she's like confronting Coop really didn't.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, like that whole kind of pivot for her to be really sympathetic most of the time, and then we have seen her become this all of a sudden this like cold-hearted. Yeah, it's become femme
Yeah, the
fatale. This thing.
substance of it didn't work for me either from a
Right.
story
Yeah,
perspective.
I agree.
I mean, framing him for murder because he
Yes,
wasn't kinder to her, like
exactly,
that.
exactly.
We have not seen things in her character that make sense. Like she doesn't seem like the most kind-hearted, generous person ever, but she also doesn't seem like a calculated, awful person who would be like, yeah, no big deal. I'll just frame this guy for murder because I don't like the way he treated me after we slept together. Like I didn't get that from that character.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, this is totally self-inflicted. Again, it's a totally unnecessary plot development, right? People are saying that he was in financial trouble and he owed money to the mob. And they're like, ooh, maybe the mob rubbed him out, right? She could have done what she did, which is turned the suicide into a murder investigation without pointing the finger at him, without planting the gun in his car. There's no reason that she needed to take it that far. And then Coop could have still been dragged into this because of his own actions, breaking into her house. And I mean, think about that. He broke into her house and was thinking about stealing something from her, right? That is really messed up. Elena says that as well earlier, that it is really messed up when you consider like what his actions were. He was looking to, were still together or had just broken up, one or the other, and he was despicably going to break into her house because he knew she was out of town to steal something from her. But she doesn't know that. So there could be a way where she discovered that he was doing the thieving, and that she then wanted to get revenge for that. But or alternately, that he had just slipped and fall like he did. They found his blood, made him a suspect, and then before they're like, they're looking at you for this, and they don't have you dead to rights. Because think about it, if that was the plot earlier on, then we would need like a big case to tied it to him, right? We need to have a big investigation. So there had to be a lot of evidence. But this isn't presumed innocent where we're investigating this murder from the very beginning of the show. He's been arrested for this like one episode ago. It just happened at the end.
Mhm.
We've only had this world we're in where he is the suspect is 1.5 episodes long, right? So the fact is like, you could have just been like, oh, they found his DNA there, and then he's still trying to get himself out of that. And then there could be something sketchy. Like, for example, he stole something from her house and they found it in his house. And then that adds to this circumstantial case. And then the truth comes out one episode later. The point is that making her like, I framed you for this murder because you weren't nice to me as enough is it's like you said, completely out of her character. Like we've never seen her be that petty about anything.
Exactly. I mean, she was a little snipey with that one cosmetic store lady, but that's it.
Right. Yeah, not the whole like I'm framing you for this murder. Like not only because think about how crazy that is. Not only is it like he was murdered because obviously the result that she wants is to make it look like a murder, right? Which by the way we speculated on multiple episodes here, probably episode 2 or something when we first speculated on this, that it was actually a suicide and she was trying to cover that up. Not her. I actually suspected it might be someone else who was trying to help her, but it turned out to be directly her. But like to your point, it's just like the idea that she is, willing to throw him under the bus. Why? Like it's
Right.
like what did he do that was so bad? It's all crazy. What? Because he's still in love with Mel? Like
Yeah, just
she
drop the gun into the river like a normal person.
exactly right, or anywhere else, like if you want them to find the gun, then put it somewhere else, but like putting it in Coop's car is obviously intentionally trying to tie him to the crime. And yeah, it just seems like it seems really crazy.
And then also the substance of this plot, I also don't buy the suicide. I mean, I think yeah, they tried to say he was like drunk and on antipsychotics or something like that
Yeah.
to kind of explain that maybe he wasn't in his right mind. But again, like what we've seen of this character does not seem like a guy that would commit suicide.
Right.
So
Not that
I
we
don't
knew
know.
him that well, but it is very convenient plotting. And we suddenly see this version of him where he's completely like losing his mind, FaceTiming with her during his suicide. And this whole thing is crazy. And as I was watching this, my wife, we were reacting to it in real time. And we're like, when she's screaming like about Paul in her parents'
Hmm.
modest South Boston home, she's from South, she's a Southie, right? Like she's not like living in some giant mansion. And like, wouldn't the parents come in and be like, "Oh my God, what happened? What happened? What were you screaming about?" And then she'll say like, "Oh, Paul, he just called up. He got me so mad. He's whatever." And then like, this wouldn't be an interesting piece of information that happened later. It's just all of this is just convenient plotting. That like, for example, he is FaceTiming with her at that moment, and she then gets in the car. No one notices that she leaves. No one checked her phone locations during this period of time. I guess she left her official phone back at her mom's house and took her burner phone, which kind of makes sense because we actually see this would have been a fun twist, by the way. We actually see that when he says, "Are you home?" and she
Yeah.
goes, "No, I'm in Boston." Remember, she's literally exiting from the back
Yeah.
door. So it's like they could have run into each other, which would have been fun if
I
she had
know. They
seen
must have
him.
just missed each other. Yeah.
It would have been fun if she had actually seen him. And that's
Yeah.
why she framed him, because she's just like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And then she
Yeah.
sees him break into the house.
That would have made a lot more
And then
sense.
she's just like, "What the hell is he doing in my house?" And then she's like, "Oh, his car's parked outside or down the street or whatever. I'm going to throw this gun into his car." That would have been more fun for me, that, she had
That would
said,
have made a lot more sense. I also was thinking she must have paid cash for the tolls. She didn't take an easy pass.
yeah, that's right. She had to take the Easy Pass off the car, which people never forget to do, by the way. And some
Yeah.
places, by the way, they just read your plates. They don't even, that's how they
But
bill
it
you.
seemed like she was like uncovering the car. Like I think this was a classic car that her family
Oh, maybe it was
kept.
an old car. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. So
But
yeah,
still
so
very inconvenient to have to pay cash tolls all the way from Boston.
maybe it's the middle of the night, so it's like maybe not that long line at the toll plaza. But this is this is all silliness. And like I said, I mean, I think it was right there. You could imagine a situation where she is suspicious of him committing the crimes in town for some reason. Maybe he's wearing a piece of jewelry or something, and she's like, that's strange that maybe he is the person who's breaking into people's homes. Then she catches him breaking into her house, and she realizes that that's who he is, and he's there to rob from her. And she's like, "You know what? He just broke up with me and now he's trying to steal from me. Screw him." And I'm like, "All right, I'll buy that." Right.
Yeah.
Just the fact that she's just like, "He didn't take me on more public dates. That's it.
Yeah.
He's going to jail for life." It
Yeah.
seems like a little too much. But anyway, that is the resolution to this mystery. So, but that's very unsatisfying. I mean, me and my wife were both like, "Oh, are you kidding me?"
Yeah,
We were not satisfied with this at all.
totally agree. Very unsatisfying.
And that all, and by the way, and I just think the back half of this episode is pretty badly written, I have to say, because not only is that bad, and his narration is like so on the nose, and so much trying to do so much there to put a bow on all this in 5 minutes of more narration, as if we're not exhausted from it already. But worse than that is the whole situation when he's walking out the door and she's like, "I'm going to kill you if you walk out the door. I'm going to say you broke in here and you threatened my life." All of that is preposterous, because I would just turn to her. If it was me, I would just turn to her and I'm like, "I texted this to Mel 5 minutes ago. What are you talking about? You're going to
I
kill me
kind
now?"
of assumed he was recording the whole thing,
Oh,
or
yeah,
that
right. Or just had
Elena
it.
was there
Yeah,
recording the whole thing.
right,
Like,
right.
yeah.
I didn't think they want to have he probably didn't want to drag Elena into it, because like it seems like she just assumes that he's broken into the house again, because obviously he was in there. There is a big question mark that she must have. Why would, oh no, she doesn't know he was in there. She might think the DNA. She probably didn't even consider the fact that Coop's DNA was there. When they found Coop's DNA, she's probably just thinking it was incidental because he'd been in and out of the house so many times. So I don't think that was necessarily the case. But anyway, yeah, I don't think she wanted to drag Elena into it, because that kind of reveals that he has this, that he knows her. And of course, there's that whole side thing going on with the thefts, and he doesn't really need to reveal that. But I agree. I just assumed that, he had his phone recording all of this, or he had called the cops, and the cops were like, "Yeah, go ahead, shoot me. The cops are outside the door. I texted them this, the suicide note, But instead of him being like, nope, I just trust that you're not going to pull that trigger. Because the silly thing about it is, if he's like, I'm going to threaten you that you need to, exonerate me, or I'll let somebody see these notes. But his intention is to show this note to the cops. So it's like, I would have been like, I texted the cops this the
Right.
second I found it.
Right.
So none of this makes any sense. It's like very, very silly. And it just, once again, makes her look like she is, they just want to make her look even worse. And I don't understand why.
Yeah. And also, by the way, the cops' disinterest in that other phone didn't make any sense to me either.
Right. I completely agree. Yeah. But then they suddenly are very interested, by the way, in parallel. So it's interesting that, maybe this would have been discovered anyway. And it also feels like this is very late for this to be coming from the autopsy, that in parallel to discovering that the two other gun shots were inflicted after his death, which I had predicted like 2 months ago. But anyway, regardless of that, the fact that they didn't know that earlier seems like a big miss.
It seems like they were waiting for the report to come in.
Right. The final report. I like how it says that right on paper. Final.
Yes.
Report.
And he felt like someone in a TV show, he said, or a movie. But what happened? And again, maybe my memory is faulty here. What happened with the idea of there being a second gun? Wasn't there some idea of that?
There was something about that. I don't remember all the details of that.
You're like, I don't even care anymore. It doesn't matter.
I really don't.
This whole storyline went nowhere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, I'm very confused by that. The reason I had speculated earlier on that the other gun would be, it would be a separate, was because there seemed to be something about that. Like, the reason I speculated on the fact that there was this post-mortem shooting was because they said something at the very beginning of the investigation, like literally in episode 2, when they find the body, that they said something about that maybe it was like a different angle or something. They specifically called that out.
Oh, and so this is another question I had. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Usually when they do that postmortem exam, there is something about the angle of the shot that will lead someone to believe it was a suicide. So I don't know. A lot of stuff not I's not dotted and T's not crossed, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I don't remember. I had read it in my mind that they were talking about two different guns completely, but maybe it was just the way
I heard it too, but I don't know.
But it was maybe just the way they described it, because they say that he was killed at close range, like what do they call it? Like hitman style, like a which of course was the shot to the head, the suicide shot. But then they mentioned that there was the other shots were done from a different angle. So once again, I am pretty sure that in the history of police investigations, that is a suspicious set of, like, if I have shot you to the head, assassination style, then what were the other shots for? And if the other shots were, let's say, well, maybe they shot him a couple times, then he fell down the stairs and they shot him in the head. I think the blood evidence would indicate something different. All this is to say, and maybe they're just not very good at their jobs, but this does not seem like this was a very well examined crime scene at all, because they would have resolved this much earlier. And by the way, it could be like, well, this all happened. And by the way, this all happened in the course of a couple of weeks. In the timeline of the show, this is not like a year has passed. It's only been weeks since this whole thing has played out. I mean, he's still bruised at the beginning of this episode from his beating.
Yeah.
So what is this, like 2 weeks afterwards, potentially? So this whole thing.
Well, I've got personal experience now. A black eye takes a very long time to go away.
Sona did not have a black eye, by the way, just to be clear to the audience. Sona's son had a black eye.
Because of a recess accident, not because of a fight of any sort.
Sure.
We tried to tell him when people ask about it, because people have been asking nonstop, he should say, you should see the other kid, but he's not into it.
Sona, when I was watching this show, I was thinking that if you lived in Westmont Village, that it's like you would probably go to jail for this investigation would have probably gone completely wrong. God knows what they would have accused your family of, seeing your son the way he looked.
I am so happy that it happened at school and is documented that it happened at
Good
school.
Point. Good
Nobody
point.
can question that. Yes.
Good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, there are eyewitnesses. So, so that all of this is crazy, and it's just once again, it's just like TV plotting, which I find a little irritating that nobody noticed this until now. It's just very silly. And all of this is so accelerated that he's taking a plea deal after a few weeks. Like, what? You're not even waiting for the final autopsy to come in before you start to negotiate a plea deal? This is all silly.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think the ultimate question here is, did this show need this plot?
Yes, exactly.
And in a way, right, from the first episode, it seemed to be what was going to drive everything. Like, we get the title card 4 weeks earlier or whatever, right? It all seemed pinned to that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it feels so unsatisfying.
Right.
For it to resolve in this way, because maybe this show could have been written without this plot entirely. I haven't thought about it enough yet. But I don't feel like the payoff, I mean, for something that the show was like structured around it, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think it's the original sin of the show for sure, is this very thing. And there are more entertaining ways they could have
done this. It needed a better payoff.
Right.
So I guess I don't question including this as a plot and it driving the structure of the show. But if you're going to do that, it needed a better payoff than what we got.
And also, I just really bristle against the whole way that they threw Sam under the bus. Not that she had to be an angel or anything, but it's just not an interesting direction to take her character. When what would be more interesting to me, more fun even, is could you imagine you are simply a thief, right? You are just stealing from people. And hey, look, no harm, no foul, right? Like, these people don't even know the things they have. And could you imagine he was in the house when someone's there? He thinks nobody's there. And then he's innocently there, robbing from someone's house. That person accidentally gets killed, either because they shoot themselves. Maybe you're there during a suicide. Maybe something accidentally happens, like the gun ricochets and kills the person. Someone you know, someone who's like innocently killed. Or maybe you're there with somebody who's blackmailing you, being like, hey, you stole that art work. You're coming with me and we're doing another one of these jobs. And it's like, okay, but then I'm done with this. And that person kills the person. And now it's like, oh my God, now I am responsible for this person's death. This kind of karmic retribution that you're just having a good time. And then, oh my God, like, I did not take this seriously enough. It's led to someone's death, or minimally my implication in someone's death. That is interesting. The fact that you were set up by somebody who's like a jealous lover is like a soap opera plot. It doesn't make any sense in the context of the show.
And I definitely, as you were saying, as we've been saying, I also had the thought that they must have just missed each other at the house.
Right.
And that would have been a much more interesting way to go. That either they run into each other directly, one of them sees the other doing something, and the repercussions of that, whether she sees him stealing and he doesn't know it, he
Right.
sees her shooting Paul, she doesn't know it.
Right.
Both of those things could happen. Who knows?
Right. Right.
So there were just it feels like those options were right there.
Yeah. I mean, you could imagine once again that she is visiting, not visiting, she's worried about Paul, goes back to the house, just concerned, right? Not to do a cover up, but just concerned to check in on Paul. Like, was he just messing with me? Is he just trying to get into my head? What a dramatic turn of events. Like, I'm so angry at him. She shows up at the house and Paul is dead. And she's like, oh my God. And then she knows about the insurance and she knows everything else. And she's like, how am I going to get out of this situation? And then Coop texts you and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst time for you to text. And then you see him breaking into your house and you're like, what the hell is this guy doing? Is this, wait a second. I know he lost his job. Is this as he's been making his ends meet by stealing from us? Screw it. I'm not going to lose my livelihood because of this jerk. I'm going to frame him for this murder. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. I buy that. I buy all of that, especially if the decision is made like in the heat of the moment. She throws the gun in the car, like literally goes with his house. And then she regrets it afterwards, but it's like, it's too late. You've already done the frame up, right? It's too late. So, I mean, that I could buy. The whole like calculating, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just really too much. First of all, too much. And character wise doesn't make sense either. Yeah. Very unsatisfying in so many ways.
Right.
And by the way, just so many more interesting ways that the story could have progressed. And by the way, I have more to say in this regard of bad writing at the end of this episode.
Okay.
we'll get to it because I have a lot of similar types of like, hey, it's right there, people. It's right there. And they missed it. All right. So then after all this, before we move on, did you have anything else to say about this?
No, I think those were all my gripes.
The big reveal. I know there's so much to say here on this one particular topic, but we can move on. One remaining question I had on that before we move on specifically. Speaking of this being a frame job, do you think that, for example, they found because they find the gun later, they find Coop's blood and then they make him a suspect and then she panics and frames Coop? Or do you think that from the very beginning, like from that night, she's like, I'm going to frame Coop for this murder? Like, do you have a sense of that at all?
Well, it would have been helpful from a story construction
to show the decision making.
Again, to show a 30-second scene where she throws the gun in the trunk. Yes, and so we would have some sort of timeline.
We would know exactly. Was it the night of, because the trunk keys popping? Was it the night that they had that party and she's in his car afterwards? Was that what did he catch her just at that moment? Like, when did that happen? Because when she did it, also, once again, really explains a lot about her decision making, but we don't get that. Yeah. So.
I feel like she planned to frame him basically from the start.
It feels like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it feels that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, I don't like that either. There are other ways, right? You could see like she starts feeling like, oh my God, I might go down for this. Who can I frame? And then she's mad. Maybe she does it after she finds out that Mel and him have been together again, right? Like something that shows her, take this really cruel, honestly, a step. I know she wants to, and I do like, maybe not the word I would use, but I do kind of understand the plotting where he's kind of like, I forgave her because in a way, he's like, look, she did some really terrible things to maintain what she had, and I have done that as well, right? So maybe there's some aspect of it where I can kind of buy that, but even that is a little bit of a stretch for me. All right, we'll move past that.
Yeah.
At this point, that we have that whole like reconciliation, the families all hugging each other. We have 15 minutes of show left. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Yeah,
it was sweet. No, I thought that was sweet.
They said wait, actually. So I was like,
no, sorry.
Yeah, it is sweet. And
I like the way the kids ran towards him. I thought it was sweet.
Yeah, they're trying to replicate some of the imagery that he had in those flashbacks to a simpler time. And then, of course, not only that, like, this is like the fairy tale ending. He gets that. It turns out, like, we already had this seeded a couple episodes ago, maybe just one episode ago, I think, at this point, where the guys they met out in the city are saying, like, man, things aren't going that well since you've left. It turns out there's, like, I guess one of their biggest investors, or maybe their biggest investors, is Swedish
Swiss.
conglomerate or bank or somebody. What was that?
Swiss.
Swiss. That's right. Swiss.
Hmm.
And they only want to work with Coop. So now they're like, look, we have had no growth since you left. We need this to them to re-up with us, and they only want to talk to you. So we need you to come back into the fold. And he says, and they'll pay him back. They'll give him access to his personal fund, which is probably worth tens of millions of dollars. And then not only that, he's like, I actually want a cut of this deal, bigger than yours, even though you guys are the owners of the company. And Corbin Burnson's character is annoyed by this, but eventually they relent and say, yes, yeah, we will give you all the things you asked for. And the plane is coming out of Teterboro tonight. You have to be there at 11 o'clock. And so everything seems to be going perfectly for him. He shows up at this gala, and this is somewhat interesting. I liked seeing everybody together again. That, like, you see him settling back into the life he had before. You see the hypocrisy of it all. That people are suddenly like, "Oh, Coop, Coop," like now he's like everyone loves him even more because he got, he's been exonerated, and so I did like the feel of what's happening here, how as things are settling down, it's like everybody just wants things to go back to the way they were. And you see that subtly, you see that this is the hypocrisy of this is something that is bothering him. So I did like that they are selling this part of the episode. What'd you think about this? The gala and everything happens there.
Yeah, I liked I mean, that's kind of the underlying, or maybe not even underlying, theme of the show is the two-faced nature of these people to, whether people are up and whether they're down. And I like
Right.
the reference to the murder pool.
Right. Yes.
Right. And, the woman trying to explain it away by saying, I like a long shot. Like I liked all of that explicit recognition of people being two-faced.
And he even threatens Jules' mom, saying that he knows about the SATs. Finally, that pays off from like episode 1 or episode 2, whenever that was.
Mm-hmm.
That he says, "I know about that," and Jules can go to any other school in America, but not to Princeton. I don't know why it's an issue. I mean, they used to be friends. Like, why would this be a problem with her going to
I
Princeton?
think it has something to do with her taking like a tennis spot.
Right, that's true. Yeah, so he wants to be on a tennis team, and then they were,
Yeah, that they're probably not going to take two girls for the tennis
yeah,
team from the
like
same
one would
school.
market correct the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Mhm.
see that point. Yeah, so I guess that's what it is. Like maybe it's just like too much of the same. So see, he still is still very. This is what kind of is problematic with me in the show in general. He still is very much caught up with these things. So if he really has moved on and been like, I don't believe that these things matter anymore, then why is he so concerned that his daughter has to have the same tennis scholarship that he had at the same school he went to? So it's maybe he's
Well,
at odds
hang
with
on.
himself.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this is where I come to the defense of Coop again.
yeah,
I mean, maybe it's because for right or for wrong, I mean, who knows how much self-examination has been done, but this is what his daughter wants, and he
true, true.
wants to be the provider for his daughter, so he wants to give her what she wants.
But is it what she wants, or
Well, I
is
said I
this
don't know how much self-examination has gone into this, but this is what the daughter thinks she wants, and they have the conversation about how she wants him to remain her coach, right? So,
exactly? Yeah, that's true. She does. They did have that moment where she's like, "You're still my coach." So I guess there is that. They're back on rails again, and he wants to give her that if she's on board with it as well. But I do, to your broader point about the self-examination, I do wonder how much of this is truly her
sure, but how
dream and
much
and
does
their dream.
any teenager really know
True,
what they
true.
want? Come on, none of us know. We all think we know everything, and none of us know a gosh darn thing.
But supposedly, if he's like, I have seen behind the curtain, I know that this is all baloney. This is all like this is a trap that I've put myself into. And now I'm going to send my kids into that same trap. It's like, has he learned from this or has he not? And I don't buy the psychology here. So,
I don't think it's so clear cut. I
yeah,
think there is still a part of being a parent that says, I want to set my kid up to have the freedom to make whatever decision they choose and to not have any paths restricted to them.
right.
So by going to an Ivy League school, even if you think it's all crap, you will build that network so that if that's what ends up being important to your kid, they have those options. They're not foreclosed for them.
Perfect. So you have fallen into my logical trap, Sona. I agree with everything you said in that particular regard, but it's the same reason that I'm really irritated by the end of this episode.
Oh, well, the
Because
end of this is something else entirely.
that's the reason I mentioned that, is because I agree that he's just like, hey, he's hedging his bets. So, hey, he just wants to do the best he can possibly do, even if it is a bullshit system that he's buying into. It's like, well, they can opt out if they want to, but I'm going to give them that opportunity. And the reason I say all this is because how do you end this show where he's being offered, like, who knows, like this full package all in
Yeah.
could be $100 million and could give him all the freedoms in the world,
Yeah.
to him and his kids and everybody else, which
Yeah.
apparently, like you said, your logic holds up. I think that he's just like, well, I'm not going to turn my back on it, even if it is BS. I'm not going to
Yeah.
turn away.
That's parenting. Yeah.
And then he turns away from it, and he's just like, I'm going to steal this guy's painting instead of, so I mean, is it his own hypocrisy? He's endangering once again the livelihood of his kids. Imagine that they find out that he's
Yeah.
been stealing stuff. Then you can imagine like everybody being like, I'm going to file insurance claims on all this other stuff that wasn't stolen. Like, let's say this story comes out, all his neighbors are going to like say, "Oh yeah, my watch disappeared too. Oh yeah, that thing disappeared too." Stuff they never even owned. There was like, "Oh yeah, my painting disappeared too," and they're gonna like bankrupt Coop, no matter how much money he has, and he is going to destroy his kids' lives theoretically if that's what happens. And that's a risk he's willing to take when he has cash on the table that he's not willing to take. This ending does
Yeah,
not make any sense.
no, it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. To go back to the Swiss and the hedge fund,
Yeah.
I don't understand what happened with the character of the woman that he slept with, because we were definitely
Yes.
led to believe
Mm-hmm.
that she was going to have some role in something by the
Yes.
way this was all constructed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then that became nothing. So I don't understand why we really didn't need to see her again after the thing about, like, no, I'm not the one that complained about you. I don't think we needed to see her again at all after that. So I didn't get that. And then, yeah, it doesn't make any sense from a practical perspective of somebody who is concerned about paying the bills, not just your own bills, but your family's bills. Why would you do this?
Right.
I mean, I understand they're going for this, we've talked about this before, this Breaking Bad idea of like, this is where they feel excited. And so they are embracing something that they know is destructive. I get that that's what we're supposed to be, or I think I get that's what we're supposed to be taking away from this. But in contrast, right, Breaking Bad was about the money for his medical care
Right.
superficially. And so it was self-contained in that way. I don't think we were ever led to believe that there was a financial issue aside from the medical care. Like, I don't think they were fantastically wealthy, but the wife worked, right? Skylar worked. And
Right.
whereas here, it's been railed into us that his bills are spiraling. Everybody is counting on him. The daughter
Right.
wants the private tennis coach, and then she
Mm-hmm.
didn't, right, in the end. But regardless, like, they enumerate, they're supposed to give $250,000 to the school for the kid to stay there, for the
Yep.
son to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
like all of this. And so, how does this choice make any sense?
And he's still $150,000 in the hole from the whole painting thing, because they had to pay the artist for the fake painting. So and whatever money he had in his basement that would have covered some of
Elena's
these
hook.
bills are all gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, he's like probably an additional $500,000 in the hole now. And I'm like, where, how is this going to work, buddy? And you're just turning it away. I don't know how that works, my friend.
Well, and it seems like what they're saying is that he's going to be an art thief, right?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, as we've talked about, that's a dicey area of thievery.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know
Lou
about
does not
this.
like him doing art thief. So he's like, you know nothing about this world. And we've already discussed this, outlined it earlier, that he needs to go and take this and sell it off to somebody else to do the, to auction it off and trust them. And none of this makes any sense.
Right, because we assume he's not going to go back to Lou's connection. That didn't end well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, they did hint at the fact that he, after he beat him up, he's like now willing to work with him again. But do I want to work with this guy? Like
That's
he's
true. They did
a,
say that.
a sexual assaulter and and potentially, sold that thing for millions of dollars and gave me nothing from it. I mean, what is that?
Yeah, and resulted in, I mean, not directly, but resulted in Barney ending up getting hit by the car and
Right. I mean, there's a version of this, and maybe this will be corrected. By the way, a lot of the things I'm being critical of here at the very end might be corrected in the next season, is
I agree.
possible,
I agree.
because you could imagine a version of this where he goes to the art dealer and he says, I have another one for you. And he's like, oh my God, that's even more rare. And he goes, but you have to give me the money you got at auction last time. Like you can't pocket that.
Yeah.
So now it's like this is to get the original million that maybe he made off the other one, which of course does change his situation significantly. And then this one could be worth even more. And then maybe this is a springboard into something more beyond that. So maybe there is some chip on his shoulder that he still wants to correct what happened
Yeah.
previously. So there are ways they can fix this in the next season. But this is the thing also that really bothered me here at the end. What I said to my wife after this was all over is, once again, it drives me nuts that this is all there for everybody to see. You know what he doesn't do? He never breaks into Corbin Burnson house earlier on, even though this is the guy who screwed him over in the first place. Never finds out secrets about him, because if I was writing this, I would have had it where he gets on that plane, he gets them the deal, and then when they come back, Corbin Burnson's like, you know what? Sorry about everything that happened there. I'm so glad to be working with you again. And I'd be like, hey, I know all these secrets of yours, and I am going to keep collecting my salary. And you're not going to say a goddamn word about it because I know all this other stuff. So now, like the skills he's picked up, the cynicism about this world he's in, and the fact that he keeps getting away with stuff, and now that he's going to, blackmail people like he has a couple of times. And by the way, everything I just said may very well happen in the next season. So they might be saving that for later on to see him going down like a darker path. So maybe this is just they haven't done it yet, but they will do it. But I feel like it was just right there, right? He's broken into people's houses before. Why wouldn't, if he had tried to, they could have a slapstick action sequence where he breaks into his house. He doesn't get away with the painting or whatever he wanted to do, but he discovers some other thing, like, that maybe
Mm-hmm.
he's got a secret account at work or whatever. And now he can
Mm-hmm.
blackmail him with that. And then that is way more interesting than him just being like, no, I don't need those. Like he desperately needs this money. And he's just like, I don't really need that money. I'm past it all. I'm like Neo. I can see the code. I don't, this is all baloney now. And I'm like, really? That doesn't be the case at all. You're still promising people like money that you don't have. You didn't tell them that the money doesn't matter and they need to downsize their lifestyle. You're like, I got it all figured out, even though you're
Yeah.
like $1 million in the hole. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I did not find this to be a satisfying ending at all.
Agree.
Okay, season two. What do you want to see in season two in this particular show? Like what you like you said, I agree. I don't think the show has, maybe when it was originally planned with that murder plot twist and all that, maybe they thought it was going to be a different show than it is. What version of this show do you like the best? Would you prefer to see next season? What does this show need to do to to keep you on as a viewer?
Oh, what a good question. I like the idea that we never fully explored, although they circled back to it with the SAT thing, of not stealing material things from neighbors, but kind of finding out their secrets and using those in some way. So I don't have like a concrete plot suggestion, but they kind of did it with his lawyer and her
Yep.
affair.
Hmm.
They kind of did it with the SAT scores. I
Yep.
feel like there's a lot more that could be explored on that side of things. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that is a better way to take it. One way they could have resolved this season, but I don't want to see this, to be honest, would have been, and I actually thought if you had asked me with 15 minutes to go, what direction is the show going to go in? I thought he was going to get his old life back. And then these nefarious characters, whether it's Lou or whether it's the art dealer or whether it's Elena, because she has her own financial needs, would come knocking on the door and be like, you're not out of this yet, even as you're trying to be on the up and up again,
Hmm.
because we need what you provide. Right. And then he was
Hmm.
like reluctantly dragged into this,
Hmm.
even though that is, I think, an obvious direction they could have gone with
Hmm.
this. I don't know if I prefer, that's not a more fun show. Like if he's doing this under duress, I do like
Hmm.
the fact that he would be doing this for his own pleasure. I think that's the real fantasy of the show, right? I do like that idea of, I think that what's more valuable would be blackmailing people into giving you a job, into giving you what you want, right? So I think that is the more intriguing direction they could go in. But yeah, I'm not they've added James Marsden as a main
Right.
character in season 2. I have no idea what role he's going to play, but I would like to see the two of them. They're two very charismatic characters. Like Darren and I loved seeing James Marsden in Paradise when we covered it here on the podcast.
Hmm.
And really, I think the show needs somebody with John Hamm's level of charisma to go. And if they're competitors in some way, whether that is, on a corporate level or someone who knew who moves into the town that is maybe similarly manipulating the system or in different ways, all of that could be fun. So I do think they need somebody else for him to play with for sure. And that could be a good twist.
Yeah, I kind of was surprised, and you kind of were saying this as well, that it didn't end on some kind of cliffhanger.
Yeah, right.
I would have liked a little cliffhanger.
I also feel like, hey, you know what? Not for nothing, but I'll go back to writing this whole entire show from the perspective of not in this real world, because how many of those, when you drive through, I forget the name of that town near Sandy Hook, where Bruce Springsteen lives and stuff. When you drive through that area, these giant compounds where you have those cameras outside that you need to like announce yourself before you can like roll into the estate. But all those cameras are running all the time. So my point
Right.
is like this guy with his trunk popping open all the time, right in front of the house that he just stole from in his $250,000
Hmm.
car is
Hmm.
like, this is like pretending that we do not have modern technology. Like
Right.
this show needed to be set in the 1980s,
Right.
during like the height of
Yeah.
the boom time for Wall Street or something, for this show to maybe make sense. Maybe it was written as a period piece and they made it contemporary. Who knows? One other thing I'll say to defend the show as well. There's been a lot of talk about the Last of Us season, which was only 7 episodes long, and also how HBO had to truncate some of the seasons of their other shows. And basically, it seems like recently, in the past few months, all these shows that were caught up in the writer's strike, like either they had to finish production really quickly before the writer's strike set in, or when the writer's strike ended because of their production distribution dates, they had to shoot everything really quickly with the scripts they had on hands because they didn't have the writers. Like they could still produce, but they didn't have the scripts to be written. So anyway, all that is to say that maybe the last few episodes of this show feel off because they're like whatever the original scripts were when we first penciled them in at the beginning of the production process. That's what we have to shoot because we don't have any writers around.
Hmm.
So it is possible that this is a part of the fact that the show seemed to kind of lose its way towards the end is
Hmm.
a hangover
Interesting.
from the writer's strike. They didn't have a writer's room to go in there and say, hey, we need to fix these 4 or 5 plot holes.
Yeah.
And whatever anybody put together at the beginning of this process, they're like, I guess that's what we're shooting because we can't rewrite it now. And we
We
have
know
to
it
finish
doesn't
the
quite
show.
make sense, but this is what we've got.
Exactly. Which literally happened. I mean, like you think about, I mean, you don't watch the show, but the House of the Dragon literally is this season of House of the Dragon, which was cut to 7 episodes instead of 10. That it was like the whole time it's like we're going to war, we're going to war, we're going to war. Episode 7 ends with like everybody's on the ships, the dragons are in the sky, and like we are going to the biggest war we've ever seen on the show. See you next season. Like the whole entire 7 episodes was just a tease for what you're not going to see this season. I'm just like, holy cow, what an unsatisfying way to end the season. But that was directly because of the writer's strike. They simply did not have any more scripts. So maybe this is still left over from that. And I do hope so, because I thought the show worked really well earlier on. And then
Agree.
it just seemed to, not the strongest ending. As a matter of fact, I think the show really got weak towards the end of the episodes. I still love this concept though, so hopefully they can correct some of these things and make a more satisfying season 2. There's a lot of potential here. Any other final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Yeah, I feel just that the last 2 episodes really didn't come through in the way I was hoping they would, but nonetheless, an enjoyable season. Jon Hamm's charisma goes a long, long way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Luckily for them. And in the end, I enjoyed watching it, even though I didn't love how it all closed out.
Yeah, I agree pretty much with all that. All right, Sona. So in 2 weeks, for anybody who's listening here and wondering, what are we going to talk about next? I don't know.
I was about to say, we're wondering too.
Exactly. It is the summer, and I'm going to have like a June preview episode like I've had for the previous months. And man, this is really thin on June. This is a really rough month. I think July, we have Dexter Resurrection coming back. So that's maybe something we'll watch. You are planning to watch that, right, Sona?
I think we'll be watching it in my house regardless. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's something we'll cover here, whether I like it or not, because it might just be convenient to do. So in 2 weeks, we have a Apple TV movie, just a movie, not a series, called Echo Valley, starring Julianne Moore and Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney plays a daughter who comes back home and is in some trouble. And it's kind of like the lengths that a parent will go to try to help their child who might be in trouble, even if maybe that person ends up being guilty of what this murder that they might be accused of. So
this is like my parenting nightmare, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. And by the way, written by Brad Inglesby, who wrote Mayor of Easttown and also has the Task show, which we will definitely be covering here, by the way.
Man, this guy is obsessed with, okay, never mind. I don't want to do, well, can I do a spoiler? Mayor of Easttown, several.
Yeah, it's a few years back. Now. Spoilers for Mayor of Easttown, everybody.
This guy is obsessed with child murderers.
Child murderers, yes. Potentially, although Sydney Sweeney's not a child anymore, but yes.
Oh, okay. Right.
Children, I guess, children murderers.
I mean, every murderer is someone's child, if we're gonna.
That's true. Everybody was a child at some point. Even murderers. So we'll do Echo Valley in 2 weeks. That's in 2 weeks. But next week, Sona. So I had suggested a bunch of stuff that's coming out at the end of this particular month. And I've sampled some of it and run it by you very quickly. First of all, there is a new Generation Z. What are these guys? Not millennials. Generation Z, Generation Alpha. Maybe they're not Alpha. Maybe they're Generation Z. A bunch of kids living in New York on FX called Adults. I sampled 2 episodes of this, the 20-minute episodes, by the way. And the reviews have been pretty mixed on this. Sona, I have to say, give it a sample because I laughed. I laughed a lot watching this show.
That's all I can ask for something that is supposed to be humorous is if I laugh out loud once in a half hour, my time was well spent.
I laughed so much. These kids go to the bank to get a check issued because they don't have a checkbook. And they're like, they ask him, this guy, do you know your social security number? He doesn't know it. So he's like texting, he's texting his mom. And she goes, you don't know your social security number? And he's like, oh, no, I do. But my mom knows the shit out of that stuff. So I'm like, oh, God. It's like, so it's very funny, but generationally, I think accurate. It's funny to see the negative reviews. There are some people who seem to be older critics who are like, these kids are so annoying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I understand that, but I'm sure that's what everybody says. And then there seem to be critics who are of this generation
Right.
being like, I don't want to see annoying people of my generation or a caricature of my generation. I actually thought it was not, they weren't annoying. I thought they were like stupid kids in the way that we were all stupid kids.
All of
And
us.
but tying in like this new cultural sensitivity and stuff and mocking it, I thought it was very funny. I've only seen 2 episodes, but I laughed at least 10 or 15 times in two 20-minute episodes. I don't know. That's a good batting average for me with comedies, I got to say.
I'm telling you, if I laugh once in 30 minutes, I'm satisfied. I mean, with commercials, talking traditional sitcom format.
Right. Well, this is, I mean, I have Hulu with commercials. So yeah, commercials on my
Yeah.
version of it. I laughed. This was funny. Oh, by the way, anybody who wants to watch this, if you're watching it on TV, it's on every Wednesday on FX, 3 episodes per week. If you have Hulu, one day later, Thursday, just this past Thursday, the entire season is available to binge right now. Anyway, if you guys want to check it out, 20-minute episodes. I thought this was very funny. I thought the cast, even at the beginning, I was like, I think some of these people annoy me. By the end of episode 2, I like all of them. So
They won you over.
yeah. So I think this is well done. Check that out if that sounds interesting to you. I also checked out 2 episodes of each of these samples, by the way. 2 episodes of The Better Sister. I thought the episode 1 of The Better Sister was fantastic. It's by the same director, by the way, who directed the pilot episode, the first 2 episodes of Your Friends and Neighbors, by the way. I thought the episode 1 was really good. Sona, by episode 2, the revelation of the mystery, everybody has a secret they're keeping. There's a lot of flashbacks. I started losing confidence.
Lost you.
I mean, I was interested. And there is some interesting examination of, for example, the good sister. Maybe she wasn't the good sister back in the day, and the bad sister, maybe she wasn't the bad sister in the day. So that dynamic and the shift and the perspective on how who did who wrong, literally, given historical context, changes your perception of things. That I thought is really interesting and pretty well handled. But they have a pretty big cast. We have to cut to the other cast members and like, well, maybe they did it. Well, maybe they did it. It seems to be 85% red herrings is basically what it comes down to. So I'm really on the fence as to whether I will pursue this or not. I leave this up to you, by the way, Sona. I think that there would be enough here for us to discuss. Sample it. If you get hooked in, I'll finish it. If you're not into it, I may not go back to it, to be honest.
Gotcha.
And the last one, also 2 episodes I sampled here. There's a new show on Netflix from the creator of The Queen's Gambit called Department Q. It's based on a very successful Danish mystery series, I believe. And it's this guy who's a really, really good detective, but nobody likes him, played by Matthew Good, by the way. And this is set in Britain, not set in Denmark. It's set in Britain, this version of it. Although all these books have been made into Danish films, but now they're being adapted by Netflix. And this is based on the first book, not a murder mystery, a missing person mystery, actually. That's based on the first book. And this cop, it seems like he was almost killed. That's the opening scene we see. And one of his friends was killed. And it seems like the mystery is going to intersect with whoever tried to kill him. I believe that's going to be where we're headed. But he is back from the hospital. And he's a really good detective, but everybody hates working with him. So they give him his own department of these failed police officers and people who are like janitors, but are actually like super sleuths. And they are building this like weird ragtag group of investigators. I like all the characters a lot. And the mystery, honestly, is the reason to watch the show. They've done some really clever things and they're telling you somebody's story only for you to discover later on that is actually the case they're going to be investigating, even though you think you're seeing it contemporaneously. So it's cleverly done, interestingly done. I'm very interested in seeing how the story turns out, but that's really because of the storytelling, because I honestly am not that interested in the mystery itself. But then the way that they reveal another plot point, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I guess I will watch another episode, right? So it is mostly because I like these characters and I like the way that they're revealing the mystery is intriguing to me, even though the foundational mystery at this point, 2 episodes in, is not that interesting to me. But maybe it will expand. So yeah, I liked all 3 of these things I sampled. The easiest one to watch, of course, is Adults, which you can probably binge the whole thing in an afternoon, 20 minutes at a time. I think there's only like 8 episodes total. So it'd be a pretty quick binge. But I don't know how much we would talk about that other than like, God, that was funny. Remember when he did that thing? That
Mhm,
was
I
funny.
know it's hard to discuss a comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So other than that, like, you may want to sample it just for your own, just I'd like to get your opinion on it, whether it's irritating to you or whether you commiserate with these kids and remember that time in your life or not. And then I think maybe the better option for us to discuss is Better Sister or Department Q. I leave it up to you, Sona. You can sample one or both. Text me and let me know which one you want me to finish, and then we can discuss it next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but no interest in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh, I think that boat has passed me by, Sona.
Had to ask.
Is that available? Is that a binge? How do they release those shows, or that does that go week
You
to week?
binge it, yeah. Well, I
Okay.
mean, I guess you don't have to, but it's
Yes.
one of those that you end up inevitably binging. It's on Hulu. Yeah.
Yes, I've seen the ads on the Hulu home screen. It just premiered like a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I think it came out about 3 weeks ago, and then I was still finishing up something else. I can't even remember what it was, although I do think it was something I enjoyed. Anyway, so now I am halfway through the new season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
I've never attempted this on the podcast, obviously. Can you have a like conversation? I mean, obviously you can have a conversation about anything, but
Well, the conversation would normally typically center on what is wrong with each of these people.
okay. I'm not sure if that would. Maybe you know what? I will do this. You sample one of these episodes and come back to me. I will watch at least one episode of the current season. Do I need to watch the previous seasons of this show, or can I watch the Mormon Housewives show by
It's
itself?
such a hard question to answer because I feel like, wow, so much has already happened. But I
Right.
would just jump right in with the second season. I think, it's fine. I could fill you in on any backstory that seems relevant. You know what I would do is a quick Google of the background of this show and how it came to exist. Because are you familiar with that?
No, no.
It's kind of scandalous. This is about this group of Mormon women who live in Utah, which, is a very conservative religion. And they created this thing that they have a shorthand for. It's called Mom Talk, right? And they would make these TikToks as this group of Mormon wives. And they were very popular. And then there was a scandal because
Oh, there was they were sex adjacent or something, right? They had like
yes, soft swinging. And one of the Mom Talk ladies exposed them as, these soft swingers because she and her husband ended up splitting up as kind of a consequence of that. And, scandal ensued. And then the first season was her kind of trying to reintroduce herself to this Mom Talk group, but very little about the actual swinging in the first season,
yeah.
like references to it, but very little. But in this second season, and the ladies involved in the first season were not the ladies involved in the swinging scandal, except for this one. But in the second season, there's another mom who was involved in the swinging scandal that is introduced into the cast. So
I will. I'll sample an episode at least, and then you try it. I think you're probably going to. I think try out Better Sisters. Better
okay.
Sister. I think you. Although those are long episodes, it's a long season. I think that's the problem I have with that show. By the way, if this was like 5 episodes, I would easily binge it, no problem. But I think it's like 8 or 9 episodes. I'm like, man, that's a long. It's a long
Mm-hmm.
season.
Yeah.
Um, we could just watch as much of it as we choose to, and then we can end it with like, what will we proceed or not? Anyway, so yeah, we'll decide what that will be. We'll have something next week. We'll discuss one of these topics.
We will figure it out.
The following week is Echo Valley, like I mentioned, that movie, just a movie to watch, so pretty easy to watch that. And on Apple TV Plus, so obviously everybody has that. So who's listening to this? And then I don't know what we'll talk about the week after that, but Sona, 2 weeks after that, The Bear, the final season of The Bear is coming.
Wow.
We will definitely be discussing that. And yet again, another binge, unfortunately. I was hoping that maybe for the final season, they'd go week to week, which I would love to have a week to week of The Bear for the rest of the summer. But no, it's got to be a binge. So anyway, we'll be discussing it here on the podcast.
Looking forward to it.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for the
Okay, take
conversation.
care.
Bye.
Bye.